if you can see from the next illustration here, about half the countries ranked in the index are perceived to suffer significantly from corruption or endemic levels of corruption. This is a kind of wrongdoing that you rarely ever face in Ireland. For instance, you will rarely ever be confronted by a Garda asking or demanding a bribe to overlook a traffic violation. You won't hear of teachers demanding bribes from school children to pass an exam, or doctors demanding bribes from a mother to be in a maternity ward. It's quite a common phenomenon elsewhere in the world. We would say, however, that corruption affects Ireland in different ways, and I'll talk about this in a moment. Ireland's score remains stable this year. Last year it moved ahead of the United Kingdom for the first time in the index. Ireland is ranked 14th out of 178 countries, ahead of the United Kingdom in 20th place. It is almost impossible to say why this is the case. The only conclusions we can draw is that the international business community's attention was drawn by both the cash for peerages scandal about 2 or 3 years ago and the BAE scandal. The BAE scandal involved allegations of bribery made against Britain's largest defence manufacturer for contracts in Saudi Arabia, and it hit headlines worldwide. It's a little bit puzzling, to say the least, why Ireland's score has remained stable. I'm not a statistician, but I'm reassured by my colleagues in Berlin that a lot of it has to do with the methodology of the survey. If a country beside you, let's say Austria, Germany, or in this case United Kingdom, which is so close to us, is affected by a high-profile scandal and it affects its score, our score goes up irrespective of whether corruption levels have increased or not. So even if the international business community believes that corruption is now more, or is a more serious issue for the country to face, it won't make much difference if to our score and our ranking if those countries beside us suffer suffer from bad publicity in the preceding years. It gives you an idea of the kind of scale of and the variation in scores. The top of the index, Denmark and New Zealand score 9.3 out of 10, which would indicate relatively very low levels of corruption. Ireland scores 8 out of 10, with a 10 denoting a very clean jurisdiction. Countries like Somalia and Myanmar score 1.1, 1.4 out of 10. Any country below 3 is believed to suffer from endemic levels of corruption, where corruption affects every part of society, government and business. And you'll see that the majority of those countries from Italy down are believed to suffer from endemic levels of corruption. Italy scores below 4 on 3.9. And in relative terms, compared to our Western European neighbours, Ireland sits in the top third of European countries, and that's an improvement from over the last few years, where it was ranked in the middle of the EU. This diagram will give you an impression as to the scale and intensity of corruption around the world, according to the surveys used in the index. Those countries in red are perceived to suffer from endemic levels of corruption. Those countries in yellow or dark yellow, less so. What does it mean? Well, firstly, it means we're, as I said at the outset, we're not faced or confronted with the kind of corruption that you see in many parts of the world, and particularly in low-income countries, where bribery is a way of life for underpaid officials. I was in Indonesia a few years ago, driving past a line of traffic, and could see traffic policemen, their wallets out, taking money from the motorists. And you'd be stopped by policemen asking for cigarette money, effectively begging. In Central Asia, I've seen policemen drunk cleaning against lampposts, and they'd walk out in front of a car demanding money or even a bottle of whiskey. We're not confronted, thankfully, we're not confronted with that level of corruption. But it's not to say that we don't have our own problems. What the index does not mean, the Irish Times today said, and the Irish Times website said that corruption levels are low in Ireland. That is not true. We can't say for certain to what extent the country is affected by corruption. Having talked to whistleblowers, having undertaken enough study over the past few years on the topic, I can say that the situation is far more serious than this index would have a casual observer to believe. The other thing, as I pointed out as well, is that the index does not cover or does not capture the kind of corruption that has led us into the economic quagmire we currently find ourselves in. It doesn't capture the kind of crony capitalism involving vested interests in politicians in trading favours and influence. That is a feature, particularly in Western European and North America, in Western European countries in North America. In 2004, the World Bank Institute published this legal corruption component index. It hasn't been repeated for some reason. The information was gathered by the World Economic Forum. And you'll see here down at the bottom, Ireland sits amongst a number of countries, including countries in the developing world. We rank behind South Africa, Malaysia, Ghana, Botswana, Tunisia, China and Jordan in terms of our ability to stop the undue influence placed on public policymakers by vested interests. And funnily enough, this data was gathered by the World Economic Forum, and the respondents were business opinion leaders from Ireland and from the respective countries. So Irish business people believed that it was too easy to unduly affect public policy in Ireland. Suffice it to say, trust in politics, trust in business has dropped dramatically over the past few years, dropped more so in terms of business trust than any other country ranked by Edelman public relations firm in its trust barometer. Likewise, the majority of people in Ireland don't believe that enough is being done to tackle corruption here, corruption in whatever form, legal or illegal. I'll finish by saying that if we're to tackle this problem effectively, we need to undertake relatively painless, inexpensive measures. We need to take very real, substantive steps to open up government and to make it acceptable for people to speak up and to act in accordance with their conscience. We've found over the past year alone 2 whistleblowers arrested effectively for blowing the whistle. One Garda whistleblower for leaking information about a minister trying to influence a Garda investigation. The second, a teacher in Waterford, who after a year after reporting concerns about a false funded scheme, was arrested in front of her class for apparently having a business plan on a external flash drive. She was held in custody for 7 hours, and a file, the last we heard, was being presented to DPP. More recently, Noel Wardick of the Red Cross has faced disciplinary action for airing his concerns about governance at the Red Cross, and a finding of gross misconduct has been made against him. If we're to tackle corruption, in whatever form it is, legal or illegal, we need to do whatever it takes to open up government and to protect those who speak up in accordance with their conscience. I'll leave it with you there. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, John.